I sat quietly by the cradle, gazing at my baby boy's sleeping face. Leo, my little one, was just over a month old. His skin was delicate and pink, his tiny lips occasionally smacking as if dreaming of nursing. Outside the window, dusk was settling, painting the rooftops of the city in hues of orange and red. The scene was peaceful, but my heart was not. A storm was silently brewing, originating from a small, strange object I had found just hours earlier. My husband, Hugo, was a man anyone would envy. He was tall, handsome, with a stable job at a large construction firm. He doted on me, especially since I became pregnant with Leo. He said I was his whole world, that all his hard work was for us, to give mother and son a full, happy life. I had believed him naively and completely until today. That afternoon, while Hugo was at work, I took the opportunity to tidy up our bedroom. I wanted to reorganize his wardrobe, putting away winter clothes to make room for his summer attire. As I pulled a travel bag he often used for short business trips from the corner of the closet, a strange object fell out, rolled across the floor, and stopped at my feet. It was a small, transparent blue plastic bottle with English words I couldn't fully understand. It didn't look like any medicine or cosmetic I had ever seen. Curious, I picked it up, turning it over. The liquid inside was thick and clear like gel. A vague sense of unease crept into my mind. I placed the bottle on the vanity, trying to dismiss the swirling thoughts. Perhaps it was a souvenir he'd bought somewhere, or a new type of hand sanitizer from a colleague. I told myself this, but my intuition overpowered my reason. We hadn't been intimate since the last months of my pregnancy, and I was still in my postpartum recovery period. So what was this bottle of lubricant for? I vaguely guessed its purpose from the faint illustrations on the label doing in his bag. For the rest of the afternoon, I couldn't focus on anything. The image of that bottle haunted me. I tried to find a reason for him, a plausible explanation. Maybe he bought it for us, for when I had fully recovered. But why hide it in his travel bag? Why not say a word to me? 1,000 whys drilled into my head. When Hugo came home, he was as gentle as ever. He hugged me, kissed my forehead, then went to coo at our son. Was my love tired at home? Was my boy a good boy? His voice was still warm, but to me, it sounded unnervingly fake. I tried my best to smile and respond normally, but my heart was on fire. I watched his every move, his every glance, searching for a crack, a sign of deceit, but there was none. He was too perfect, too seamless. That night, I lay beside Hugo, pretending to be fast asleep. His steady breathing filled the air, but to me it was the sound of betrayal. I turned away, tears silently streaming down, soaking my pillow. That small blue bottle was like a monster, slowly gnawing away at my trust and happiness. I knew a crack had appeared in my marriage, and I feared that with the slightest breeze it would shatter into a million pieces. The seed of doubt had been sown, and I knew I had to find the answers myself, no matter how harsh the truth might be. The following days were a torment of suspicion. I had hidden the bottle of lubricant, but its image never left my mind. I became more sensitive, noticing every little thing Hugo did. The way he startled at a text message, the way he'd sneak onto the balcony for a phone call, or how he set a new password on the laptop we had always shared. All things I might have once considered normal, a matter of personal privacy, now became evidence against him. I felt like I was going mad, a paranoid wife poisoning herself with her own deductions. But a woman's intuition, especially that of a betrayed wife, told me I was not wrong. I needed clear proof, something that would shatter any denial he could offer. My target became his phone, his constant companion. The opportunity finally came one weekend evening. After dinner, Hugo said he needed to shower to prepare for an early meeting with a client the next day. He tossed his phone onto the bed and went into the bathroom. My heart pounded. This was it. I glanced towards the bathroom. The sound of the running water assured me he would be in there for a while. Leo was sound asleep in his cradle. I tiptoed to the bed, my hand trembling as I picked up his phone. A pang of guilt for invading his privacy shot through me. but the pain and suspicion overrode everything. I took a deep breath and unlocked the screen. He was still using the old password. My birthday. A bitter irony. He used our anniversary to hide his filthy secrets. I began my search. Messages, social media, call logs, all suspiciously clean. Not a single strange message. Not one suspicious number. He had deleted everything meticulously. I was about to give up when a thought struck me. Sometimes the most dangerous place is the safest. I scanned the neatly organized apps on his screen. My eyes stopped on a folder named Work. It looked perfectly normal, containing a few apps related to stocks, company email, and his work calendar. But tucked away in a corner was an unfamiliar icon. It was an image of a mother holding a child, named Baby Love, a childcare app. Why hide it in a work folder? My heart tightened. I clicked on the app. Its interface wasn't like the ones I used to track Leo's development. It looked more like a miniature social network, and when I went to the messages section, my world collapsed. Before me were hundreds, thousands of saccharine messages between Hugo and someone named Clara, and Clara was none other than the nanny I had personally chosen to help care for Leo. She was young, efficient, and seemed to love children. I had trusted her, treated her like family. I read, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. The words danced before my eyes, blurring through my tears. I miss you like crazy. Last night was amazing, my love. Wish I was with you now instead of my frumpy wife at home. Those words were daggers stabbing straight into my heart. They weren't just having an affair. They were mocking me, ridiculing me with the cruelest words. Worse, as I scrolled up through older messages, I was stunned to realize their relationship had begun when I was in my final months of pregnancy. Right here in this house, while I was burdened with a baby bump and racked with contractions, my husband and the nanny were sneaking around behind my back. The water in the bathroom stopped. Startled, I quickly exited the app, cleared the history, and placed the phone back where it was. I rushed into my own bathroom, muffling my sobs. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back was pathetic. Tangled hair, a pale face, her eyes swollen and red from crying. The truth was out. A truth more brutal than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't just a crack. It was a chasm dividing my marriage. And now, I stood at its edge, alone and shattered. The bathroom door opened. Hugo stepped out, a towel wrapped loosely around his waist, his hair still wet. He was whistling a happy tune, looking completely relaxed. He had no idea that in the few short minutes he was showering, my world had completely fallen apart. He saw me standing frozen before the mirror and came to hug me from behind. "What's wrong, my love? You look so lost." His hands on my shoulders, his touch made my skin crawl with disgust. The fresh scent of his soap, a scent I once loved, now made me nauseous. I wanted to scream, to claw at his deceitful face, but I didn't. I just shook my head, gently but firmly removing his hands. "I'm just a little tired. Postpartum recovery is weakening me." My voice was hoarse. I didn't dare look him in the eye, afraid that one glance would unleash the torrent of hatred boiling inside me. Hugo didn't seem to suspect a thing. He just grunted in agreement and went to the closet to get dressed. I couldn't sleep a wink that night. I lay still, listening to the steady breathing of the traitor beside me and the gentle breaths of my son in his cradle. The two most important men in my life. One was my source of life, my love. The other had ruthlessly trampled on that love. My tears flowed again, but this time they were silent, hot, and bitter. Happy memories flooded back, torturing me. The day Hugo proposed on a windy bridge, kneeling and saying I was the only woman he wanted to spend his life with. The day we found out about Leo, how he lifted me up and spun me around, shouting with joy. The nights he stayed up to massage my back when I had cramps during pregnancy. Were they all lies? Was that love, that care, all just an elaborate act? The physical pain of childbirth was nothing compared to the emotional agony I was enduring. I felt so foolish, so pathetic. While I struggled with my changing body, sleepless nights, and the loneliness of a new mother, My husband was seeking novelty and excitement with another woman. I looked over at Leo. He was innocent. He was the fruit of our love, at least from my side. But now, looking at him brought a pang of sorrow. What would he think when he grew up and learned what his father had done? The family I had so carefully built was now just a hollow shell. As I thought, the pain inside me transformed. It was no longer weak and sentimental. It began to crystallize, becoming hard and sharp. I had cried too much. Tears solved nothing. Confront him? For what? To hear him deny it, or worse, offer a half-hearted apology and continue sneaking around? No, I couldn't accept such easy forgiveness. This betrayal had to be paid for. They had sown the wind, and they would reap the whirlwind. They had pushed me into hell, and I would drag them down with me. Staring into the darkness, a cruel and cold decision began to form in my mind. Dawn broke, but the first rays of sunlight couldn't warm my frozen heart. I hadn't slept at all, yet my mind was unnaturally clear. Last night's pain had condensed into a different kind of energy, dark, powerful, and filled with hatred. I got out of bed and walked to the window. Soon Clara would arrive. She would flash that fake smile, ask sweetly about my health, and lovingly care for Leo. Every action of hers was now repulsive in my eyes. She and Hugo had turned me into a fool, performing a perfect play right before me. But every play must have an end, and I would be the one to write the final act. I was done crying. Tears were for the weak, for victims. I refused to be a victim. I decided I would be the judge. I wouldn't cause a scene, wouldn't make a fool of myself. That would only make me more pathetic in their eyes. I needed a plan, a revenge plan, so subtle, so cruel, that they would taste a pain and humiliation 1,000 times greater than what I had endured. I went into the bathroom, opened the cabinet, and took out the fateful bottle of lubricant. I stared at it. It had started my nightmare, and now it would be my instrument of justice. A crazy but tempting idea flashed in my mind. I wouldn't throw it away. I would turn it into a weapon. I thought of the tube of superglue Hugo kept in his toolbox for fixing shoes and broken things. It was transparent, dried quickly, and once it bonded, it was nearly impossible to separate without a special solvent. A cold, twisted smile appeared on my lips for the first time since I discovered the truth. The plan began to take shape. I would switch the contents of this bottle. I would turn their slick liquid of lust into a deadly trap, a shackle that would bind them together in excruciating humiliation. They wanted to be together so badly? I would help them get their wish in a way they would never forget. I began to act. I carefully emptied the lubricant into the toilet and flushed. Then, wearing gloves, I carefully squeezed the superglue into the empty bottle, just enough so it looked unchanged. I screwed the cap back on, wiped the outside clean, and placed it back in the exact same spot in Hugo's travel bag. Everything was done silently, precisely, and coldly. I no longer recognized myself. The gentle, loving woman was gone. In her place was a woman with a heart full of vengeance, patiently waiting for her prey to walk into the trap. When Clara arrived, I greeted her with a smile that even I found terrifying. "You're here. You look so fresh today." My voice was sickeningly sweet. Clara seemed a bit surprised by my sudden friendliness, but quickly responded in kind. Throughout the day, I watched them, Hugo and Clara. They still exchanged furtive, loving glances when they thought I wasn't looking. They played their roles perfectly, the good boss and the diligent nanny, but they didn't know the curtain was about to fall. And I, an unwilling audience member, had become the director of the final, bloody, tear-filled act I had orchestrated. My tears had turned to venom, and it was about to be injected straight into the hearts of those who betrayed me. The following days, I turned myself into a brilliant actress. I was the gentle wife, the doting mother, the kind employer. I took meticulous care of Hugo, asking about his work, preparing his favorite meals. I treated Clara even better, occasionally giving her extra money, buying her new clothes, thanking her for taking such good care of Leo. I did it all with a smile, But behind that smile was a heart of ice and a plan waiting for the right moment. My patience was that of a hunter lying in wait. I knew human desire couldn't be suppressed for long, especially for two people drowning in sin. The more discreet they tried to be, the more fiercely the flames burned within them. I saw it in their hurried glances, in Hugo's restlessness when he had to travel, in the suggestive way Clara dressed and spoke around him. They thought I was still the poor, clueless wife they mocked in their messages. Good. Their overconfidence was my greatest ally. The trap was set. The bottle of superglue, disguised as lubricant, lay dormant in Hugo's bag. He had probably forgotten about it, or perhaps he was waiting for the right occasion. And I was waiting too. I was waiting for a night when their guards were down, a night they thought they could safely indulge in their guilty pleasure. That opportunity came on a Friday night. Hugo announced he had to entertain an important client and might be home very late, telling me and the baby to go to sleep first. I knew it was a lie. What client meets late on a Friday night? It was an excuse. And I also knew Clara wouldn't be going back to her own place. She had asked to stay over, claiming she was worried about me being alone with the baby. Such a touching reason, if I didn't know the real motive behind it. I smiled and readily agreed. That's wonderful. I'll feel much better with you here. That evening, I deliberately cooked a feast. The atmosphere was strangely tense, masked by forced laughter and conversation. After dinner, I said I was tired and wanted to go to bed early. I took Leo to our room and closed the door, but I didn't sleep. I sat in the darkness, my ears pricked like an animal's, listening to every sound outside. Around 11 p.m., I heard the front door open and close softly. Hugo was back. He didn't come to our bedroom. I heard his cautious footsteps heading towards Clara's room, the guest room at the end of the hall. Then, the soft click of her door opening and closing. Silence. An eerie silence enveloped the house. I could imagine everything happening in that room. The anticipation, the secrecy, and then they would find the bottle of lubricant Hugo had prepared. A vicious smile spread across my face. The play was reaching its climax. All I had to do was sit here and wait for their horrified screams. My sweet trap had finally caught its prey. I sat motionless on the bed in the pitch-black room, every sense focused on the sounds from the end of the hallway. The house was spacious and well-insulated, but in the dead of night, I could still hear faint noises, whispers, muffled giggles, the rustle of clothing. Each sound was like a needle prick to my calloused heart, no longer causing pain, only a cold sense of satisfaction. I pictured the scene. Hugo, the husband I once adored, caressing the woman who had stabbed me in the back. They were enjoying what they believed to be a moment of bliss, built on my suffering, right under the same roof as me and our infant son. They had no idea their fleeting pleasure was about to come at an unimaginable price. About 15 minutes passed in heavy silence. I started to feel anxious. Had something gone wrong? Did they discover something unusual? But then, a soft gasp, more of surprise than pain, came from Clara's room. Then silence again. They must have found and were now using the gift I had prepared. I closed my eyes, imagining their reaction. At first, there would be the deceptive smoothness of the glue. They wouldn't notice a thing. But after just a few seconds, as body heat and friction caused the solvent to evaporate, the superglue's true nature would take effect. It would start to bond, tightening its grip on them, turning their tryst into a nightmare. And then, what I had been waiting for finally happened. First came a panicked cry from Clara. "Hugo! What's happening? I can't move!" This was followed by Hugo's confused and annoyed voice. "What are you talking about? Stop messing around. What the hell is this?" The silence was shattered, replaced by chaotic sounds, struggling, moans, and Hugo's swearing. They had realized they were stuck together. I could imagine the horror on their faces as they tried to pull apart, only to find it impossible. The more they struggled, the tighter the bond became, causing painful abrasions and tearing their skin. "Help! Help me! It hurts so much! Do something!" Clara's desperate pleas filled the air. Shut up! Damn it, what the hell is in this bottle? Hugo roared in helpless agony. I sat on the bed, covering my mouth to stifle a laugh. A dark, maniacal laugh. This was the symphony I wanted to hear. Their screams were the balm for my bleeding soul. They wanted to be stuck together, didn't they? I had granted their wish. Now, they were inseparable, forced to face each other in the most humiliating and painful position imaginable. The chaos in their room escalated. I heard furniture toppling over. They must have tried to move and fallen. Cries, screams, and pleas blended into a cacophony. The night of sin had become the night of retribution. And I, the unseen judge, sat and savored the verdict I had delivered. The panic in that room lasted for nearly half an hour. Finally, after all their attempts to free themselves had failed and the physical pain intensified, I heard Hugo's trembling voice. We have to call an ambulance. There's no other way. Call an ambulance. Those 3 words were a potent stimulant. My plan had succeeded beyond my wildest expectations. It wasn't just about physical torment. It was about pushing them into a humiliating, inescapable situation. Calling for medical help meant their secret would be exposed, at least to the paramedics. And I wouldn't let the story end there. I heard Hugo fumbling with his phone, his voice shaking as he tried to explain the situation. It must have been the most difficult call of his life. After he hung up, a silence of despair fell over them. I knew I had to act. I walked out of my room, flicking on the hallway light, pretending to have just been woken by the noise. I let out a loud yawn and called out in a sleepy voice, "What's all the commotion, Hugo? Clara, are you okay?" I walked towards Clara's room. The door was ajar. I pushed it open. A tragic and pathetic scene unfolded before me. Hugo and Clara, completely naked, were stuck together in a grotesque position, sprawled on the floor amidst a tangle of blankets and pillows. The skin where they were joined was red and inflamed, some parts bleeding from their struggle. Their faces were a mask of pain, fear, and utter shame. I covered my mouth, my eyes wide, playing the part of a wife in absolute shock. "Oh my God, what are you 2 doing?" Hugo couldn't look at me. He turned his face away, mumbling, "Eliza, I can explain." "Explain what?" I shrieked, my voice full of anguish and fury. "How dare you do this in my house, you bastards!" I lunged forward, pretending to attack Clara, but really just adding to the chaos. I pushed and shoved and wailed, playing the part of the pitiful, betrayed wife to perfection. Just then, the wail of an ambulance siren grew louder. "An ambulance? You even called an ambulance?" I screamed. "Do you want the whole world to know about this? This was exactly what I wanted." The siren had already woken up a few curious neighbors. I heard windows opening, people whispering. I ran to open the front door for the paramedics. As they brought the stretcher in, I deliberately left the door wide open, allowing the prying eyes outside a better view of the spectacle inside. The paramedics themselves were momentarily stunned by the bizarre situation. They tried to maintain their professionalism, quickly covering Hugo and Clara with a blanket and figuring out how to get them onto the stretcher. It was an incredibly difficult and painful process for the lovers. Finally, they managed to carry the grotesque, fused pair out to the ambulance. I stood at the door, tears in my eyes, looking like a heartbroken wife. The neighbors looked at me with pity, whispering and pointing at the ambulance as it sped away, tearing through the quiet night. No one knew that behind my pathetic facade I was cheering. My play had reached its spectacular finale. Hugo's reputation, from this moment on, was utterly destroyed. Hugo and Clara were taken to the hospital. It took the doctors a considerable amount of time and a special chemical solvent to separate them. The result was severe chemical burns and skin damage in their most sensitive areas. They had to stay in the hospital for a day for observation before being sent home with a pile of medications and a long list of things to avoid, especially foods that could cause allergic reactions, like shellfish. I knew all of this. I had called the hospital, pretending to be the worried wife, to inquire about their condition and listen to the doctor's instructions, and another phase of my torture plan was already forming. The day they returned, I greeted them with a somber face, without a single word of reproach. "What's done is done," I said. "Nothing we say can change it now. Your health is what's most important. Just rest and get your strength back." Hugo and Clara, walking with difficulty and covered in white bandages, looked at me with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. They probably thought I was a forgiving wife, that I had decided to let it all go. They were wrong. My torture had only just begun. That evening, I announced I would personally cook a nourishing meal for the two patients. I bustled in the kitchen for hours. When I brought the food to the table, both Hugo and Clara's faces turned pale. On the table was a lavish seafood feast, a huge steaming red king crab, a platter of fragrant garlic butter lobster, spicy oysters with lemon and chili, and rich grilled scallops. All high-end, expensive dishes and all the very things the doctor had warned them to avoid completely. "Eliza," Hugo stammered, speechless. I smiled innocently. "What's wrong? I thought you two must be exhausted after your ordeal. I made these special dishes to help you recover. These are all your favorites, aren't they? Eat up while it's hot." I placed a piece of fragrant white crab meat into Hugo's bowl. "Go on, this crab is so fresh." Then, I put a large lobster onto Clara's plate. "You eat too, Clara. Don't be shy. You've worked so hard for this family." They both sat frozen, staring at their plates. The aroma of the seafood was tantalizing, but to them, it was poison. They knew if they ate it, their weeping wounds would become unbearably itchy, swollen, and painful. I can't eat shellfish, ma'am. I'm allergic," Clara mumbled, her face drained of all color. "Oh, really?" I feigned surprise. "What a shame. I didn't know. What about you, Hugo? You're not allergic, are you? Eat up. Don't disappoint me." Hugo sat in silence, sweat beading on his forehead. He couldn't say the doctor had forbidden it. That would be admitting the cause of his injuries. He looked at me, his eyes pleading, but I only returned a gentle smile, one that held a challenge and a chilling cruelty. The meal dragged on in oppressive silence. I leisurely enjoyed the feast, occasionally praising how delicious it was and urging them to eat. Hugo and Clara just watched, swallowing hard. It wasn't a meal. It was a session of psychological torture. I wanted them to crave it, to suffer, to feel the helpless bitterness of seeing their desires right in front of them, yet unable to touch. Just as I had once craved a happy family, a faithful husband, everything they had stolen from me, this seafood feast was just the appetizer for the hell I had prepared for them. The bitter seafood feast instilled a tangible fear of me in Hugo and Clara. They began to look at me differently, with wariness and suspicion, the previous contempt gone. Clara quietly asked for a few days off to go back to her hometown, but I knew she was just trying to escape me. I cheerfully agreed, even giving her some extra money. I didn't want her to disappear too soon. The best part of the show was yet to come, and she couldn't be absent. My attention now focused entirely on Hugo. He moved about the house like a shadow, avoiding me as much as possible. The wounds from the glue, combined with the mental torment, had clearly taken their toll. He looked gaunt and exhausted. He had to apply the ointment prescribed by the doctor himself every day, an antibiotic cream meant to soothe the skin, prevent infection, and promote healing. And that became my next target. I waited until he left for work, then slipped into the bedroom to find his tube of ointment. I wouldn't throw it away. I would turn it into another instrument of torture, a slow, lingering pain. I went to a specialty food market and bought the hottest chili powder I could find, made from ground bird's eye chilies. I also bought a small vial of pure chili oil extract, the kind used in balms for joint pain but in a highly concentrated form. Back home, I began my concoction. Wearing gloves, I squeezed most of the ointment into a clean bowl. Then, I slowly added the chili powder, mixing until the concoction retained the ointment's creamy white color but now concealed the destructive power of the chili. To enhance its effect, I added a few drops of the chili oil and stirred again. The pungent smell made me sneeze, but a smile of satisfaction played on my lips. Finally, I carefully funneled the deadly mixture back into the tube, cleaned it thoroughly, and placed it back where I found it, leaving no trace. That evening, after his shower, Hugo went into the room and closed the door to apply his medicine. I stood outside, my ear pressed against the door. At first there was silence. The initial cooling sensation of the ointment must have masked everything. But a minute later I heard a soft hiss. Then his breathing became more ragged. Why does it burn so much? His moans grew louder. The burning sensation was slowly, insidiously spreading across his raw wounds. It wasn't a sharp, immediate pain, but a gnawing torture, as if thousands of fire ants were crawling and biting at his flesh. He started pacing. The frantic footsteps betrayed his agony. "Damn it! What the hell is this cream?" he growled. I heard the sound of a running faucet. He was trying to wash it off, but it was too late. The capsaicin had already seeped deep into the open wounds. Water would only spread it and intensify the burn. Hugo's groans became more pathetic, but he didn't dare cry out too loudly for fear I would hear. That silent suffering was the true peak of his pain. I turned from the door and walked quietly back to my room. Tonight's symphony was magnificent. I wanted him to taste extreme pain in the very body he had used to betray me. Every one of his moans was a joyful note in my heart. I slept very well that night, while in the next room, a man was writhing in a hell of my own making. The pain from the chili extract was only the beginning. I would make him pay much more. The days that followed were a living hell for Hugo. He had to continue applying the ointment, each time a new round of self-inflicted agony. He didn't dare tell me, nor did he dare see a doctor, probably thinking it was some side effect or his own body's reaction. Ignorance and fear bound him, making him a prisoner of my torture. Hugo's appearance deteriorated drastically. He lost weight. His eyes were sunken and dark from lack of sleep, and he was constantly on edge. The relentless physical pain drained him mentally and physically. He couldn't focus at work and was frequently reprimanded. The confident, handsome man was gone, replaced by a pathetic wreck. I continued to play the part of the devoted wife. I cooked delicious meals, always accidentally adding a little extra pepper or chili spices that would make his wounds sting. I would ask with a concerned expression, "You look so tired lately. Is work that stressful? Or are your wounds still not healing properly?" Each word was a knife twisting in his gut. He would just shake his head, avoiding my gaze and changing the subject. He was afraid of me. I could see it clearly. He feared the wife he had once dismissed, and thought he could easily deceive. But human endurance has its limits, and Hugo reached his about a week into my chili therapy. He came home from work looking even worse than usual, having apparently received another earful from his boss. After dinner, he trudged into the bathroom. A moment later, I heard a loud crash, followed by the sound of shattering objects. Startled, I ran over. The bathroom door was unlocked. I pushed it open and froze. Hugo was lying motionless on the floor, the shower still running. Bottles of shampoo and body wash were shattered around him. His face was white, his lips blue. He had passed out. I quickly turned off the water and knelt beside him, shaking him. "Hugo! Hugo, what's wrong?" There was no response. His breathing was faint. I felt a genuine surge of panic. I wanted him to suffer, to be humiliated, but I never intended to kill him. At least, not like this. Death was too easy for him. I needed him alive, conscious, to endure the full punishment I had planned. I quickly called for an ambulance. For the second time in a short period, the wail of sirens tore through our neighborhood's peace. The neighbors came out again, whispering about my troubled family. As the paramedics carried Hugo out, I watched with mixed feelings, a flicker of concern, but mostly cold detachment. He had brought this upon himself, but it was fine. The play wasn't over. His hospitalization might just open a new, more brutal chapter in my revenge. I would go to the hospital, not as a worried wife, but as a spectator awaiting the next act of the tragedy. At the hospital, Hugo was rushed to the emergency room. I sat on a bench outside, feeling strangely calm. I didn't pray or worry. I was simply waiting for an outcome, for fate's verdict on the man who had betrayed me. After a few hours, a senior-looking doctor, likely the department head, came out. He looked at me with a somber expression. "Are you the family of the patient, Mr. Hugo?" I nodded, standing up, forcing a worried look onto my face. "Yes, that's me. How is my husband, doctor?" The doctor sighed and invited me into his office. The serious atmosphere gave me a sense of foreboding, but also anticipation. "Ma'am," the doctor began slowly, "we've stabilized your husband. He fainted due to severe physical exhaustion and septic shock." "Septic shock?" I feigned astonishment. "How could that happen?" The doctor looked at me intently, as if searching for something. "That's what we were wondering. Upon examination, we found severe inflammation and necrosis on wounds in sensitive areas of his body. This condition doesn't look recent. It seems to have been ongoing and improperly treated, possibly even aggravated by a strong irritant, like capsaicin, which is found in chili peppers." My heart beat a little faster. They had found out. But I quickly regained my composure and continued my act. "Oh my God, how could that be? He was applying his prescribed medication regularly. Could it be counterfeit medicine, doctor?" The doctor shook his head. "We can't conclude that. But the more serious issue is that the necrosis has spread extensively. To save the patient's life, we have no other choice. We must perform surgery to remove all the necrotic tissue." He paused, looking me straight in the eye, and delivered the words I would never forget: a death sentence for Hugo's future. "To put it simply, ma'am, we have to surgically remove parts of his genitalia. He will survive, but his functions as a man will be almost completely lost." For a moment, I was stunned. This outcome was far beyond anything I had imagined. My plan was to torment him physically, but fate itself had delivered a far crueler sentence. He, the man who used that very part of himself to cheat on me, was now about to lose it forever. Could there be a more ironic and fitting punishment? An overwhelming sense of vindication washed over me. I had to bite my lip hard to keep from laughing out loud. I lowered my head, my shoulders shaking, pretending to sob in agony. "Doctor, please, please save my husband." The doctor patted my shoulder comfortingly. "We're very sorry, ma'am. This is the only way. We need you to sign the surgical consent form now." He pushed a paper towards me. My hand trembled as I took the pen, not from fear or sorrow, but from exhilaration. I signed my name, a firm, decisive stroke. It wasn't just consent for a surgery. It was my signature, putting an end to Hugo's life as a man. The sentence had been passed, and I was the one who executed it. Hugo's surgery lasted for hours. When the light went off, the doctor announced it was a success. Hugo was out of danger and moved to recovery. I went to see him. He lay on the bed, pale and frail, still groggy from the anesthesia. I sat beside him, looking at the face of the man who was once my husband. There was no hatred left, only a cold emptiness. It was almost over. I stayed at the hospital for a few days, playing the part of the devoted wife, feeding him porridge, wiping his face. Hugo, in his haze of pain, probably felt remorse. He would grasp my hand and whisper apologies. I would just silently pull my hand away. What good were apologies now? The day he was fully lucid was the day I delivered my final blow. I arrived at the hospital without the usual flask of porridge. In my bag was a prepared file. I walked into his room. He was trying to sit up, a weak smile on his face when he saw me. "You're here." I didn't reply. I silently pulled a chair up and sat opposite him. I took a folder from my bag and placed it on the small table beside his bed. "What's this?" he asked, his voice puzzled. "Divorce papers," I said, my voice like ice. "I've already signed. I'm just waiting for your signature." The smile vanished from Hugo's face, replaced by disbelief and horror. "Eliza, what are you saying? Why? Why now? If not now, when?" I smirked, a smile full of irony. "Did you think I would stay with a traitor? A cripple? You used your manhood to betray me, and now it's gone. The weapon has been confiscated. What use do I have for a husband like you?" My every word was a dagger stabbing into what little pride he had left. His face contorted from shock to pain, then to resentment, and finally, to despair. He understood everything. He understood that my care these past few days was just an act. It was you, he rasped. You planned all of this. So what if I did? And so what if I didn't? I shrugged. The result is the same. Sign it. Free me, and you free yourself. I pushed the papers towards him. He stared at them, then at me. Tears began to stream down his face, the tears of a completely defeated man. Finally, his trembling hand picked up the pen. He signed his name, ending our marriage, ending a dark chapter of my life. I took the signed papers and walked away without a backward glance. Hugo's choked sobs followed me, but they no longer bothered me. The hell I created for him was now closed, but the punishment from fate for him and his lover was far from over. Walking out of the hospital with the signed divorce papers, I felt no warmth from the afternoon sunday. My personal battle with Hugo was over. He had paid for his betrayal with his future and his manhood. But for me, that wasn't enough. The humiliation he caused had to be washed away with an even greater humiliation. I had one final weapon, an ace I had kept hidden. It was a video. From the moment my suspicions began, I had secretly installed a tiny camera, disguised as a coat hook, in Clara's room. It had recorded the entire sordid scene on that fateful night. The giggling, the lewd words, the panic, their bodies stuck together, and finally, the paramedics struggling to get them out. Back home, I sat at my computer and edited the footage. I blurred my own face and the image of Leo sleeping in his crib. I left only Hugo and Clara's faces, clear as day, in their most pathetic and shameful state. Then, I created an anonymous social media account named A Betrayed Wife. With one click, I detonated a bomb online. I posted the video with a short, bitter caption, "A gift from my husband and our nanny during my postpartum recovery, sharing so other sisters can be vigilant." The storm erupted. Within an hour, the video had thousands of views and hundreds of shares. The numbers grew exponentially. The internet exploded. People flooded the comments, cursing Hugo and Clara. Disgusting man, shameless homewrecker, instant karma. The public judged and condemned them. Hugo's identity was quickly exposed. His company, seeing the viral video and the damage to their image, fired him immediately. Friends and family turned their backs on him. From a successful man, he became a social pariah, a laughingstock who couldn't walk down the street without facing looks of contempt. I watched it all unfold from home, a cold satisfaction filling me. Physical pain fades, but this public shame would follow him for the rest of his life. The online mob had done its job, dragging Hugo down to the dregs of society. Now, it was time to deal with the other demon. After Hugo's downfall, my focus shifted entirely to Clara. My intuition told me there was more to her than a simple, manipulative nanny. Her calculated seduction of Hugo and that strange baby love app pointed to something darker. My revenge was no longer just about jealousy. It was about protecting my son and ensuring that predators like Clara couldn't destroy other families. I decided to investigate, starting with the baby love app. I bought a cheap phone and a burner SIM card, creating a fake profile. Mark, a wealthy, single father looking for a nanny. I used a picture of a random businessman and offered a generous salary. Within hours, my inbox was flooded with messages from young, beautiful women. Their messages were suggestive, accompanied by provocative photos. I quickly realized this wasn't a nanny service. It was a front for a high-end prostitution ring. I chatted with a few of them, pretending to be looking for more than just childcare. They were surprisingly open, quoting prices for special services. The breakthrough came from a girl named Lily. When I complained about finding trustworthy help, she let slip, "Don't worry, our agency is very reputable. Miss, Clara manages us very strictly. The girls she approves are not only good with kids and housework, but they also know how to please a man." Miss Clara. My heart stopped. I calmly asked, "Which Clara?" "Our group manager. She's amazing. She once handled a big shot from a construction company. He was crazy about her, Lily boasted. The world spun. Clara wasn't a pawn. She was a key player, a recruiter in this criminal network. Her coming to my family was no accident. It was a calculated move. Hugo was just one of many targets. The hatred in me flared. This wasn't personal anymore. This was an organized crime syndicate, and I now held the key to exposing them. Discovering Clara's true role transformed me. My personal anger gave way to a larger mission, to dismantle this entire criminal organization. I couldn't let them continue to destroy families. Acting systematically, I continued using my fake profile to gather information from Lily and others. I recorded every call, screenshotted every message. I gradually pieced together the full picture. They operated under the guise of a domestic staffing agency, supplying nannies to wealthy families. In reality, it was a high-end prostitution ring. The nannies were selected for their looks and trained to seduce men. Their targets were wealthy husbands. Clara was one of the regional managers. But messages and recordings weren't enough. I needed concrete proof. I decided I had to find their operational base. I told Lily I wanted to meet Miss LeVay, Clara in person, to discuss a large contract for a group of my wealthy friends. The bait was big enough to lure her out. After some vetting of my fake persona, Clara agreed to meet at a chic cafe. On the day of the meeting, my heart pounded. I couldn't go myself. I enlisted my cousin, a handsome aspiring actor, to play the role of Mark. I equipped him with a button camera and a recording device. I sat at another table, pretending to read, but was listening to the entire conversation through a Bluetooth earpiece. Clara appeared, stylish and confident. The conversation went as planned. My cousin played his part perfectly, and Clara, blinded by the prospect of a huge profit, revealed crucial information, including the address of a villa on the outskirts of the city where they trained new recruits. With this solid evidence, I knew I was close, but I also recognized the danger. I was up against a criminal organization. One small slip could put me and my son in mortal danger. I couldn't raid the villa myself. I needed the police. But before handing everything over, I wanted to find other victims like me. I believed in the power of solidarity. I started searching for the wives of the men mentioned by the girls, a pharmaceutical CEO, a famous architect. After days of searching, I contacted the first woman, Laura, the CEO's wife. When I mentioned the words nanny and shared my story, she broke down crying on the phone. We met. She told me a story almost identical to mine, ending in a painful divorce where she lost custody of her children due to false evidence fabricated by her husband and the nanny. Her story broke my heart and fueled my resolve. Through Laura, I connected with 2 other women who had been similarly victimized. The 4 of us, united by our shared pain and a common enemy, came together. We were no longer victims. We were warriors. We decided to stand together, pool our evidence, and bring this criminal organization to light. The investigation of one wife had become the war of many, and we would not stop until justice was served. The 4 of us compiled a massive dossier: recordings, screenshots, bank statements, the video of the meeting with Clara, and most importantly, our own testimonies. We walked into the city police headquarters, no longer afraid, but filled with fierce determination. Initially, the officers were skeptical, viewing it as a domestic dispute, but as we presented our evidence, the atmosphere grew serious. They realized this wasn't a simple affair, but a highly organized criminal enterprise. A special task force was immediately formed. With the information we provided, especially the villa's address, the police planned a raid. The night it happened, they caught Clara and dozens of other girls, along with several managers, red-handed during a debauched training party. As Clara was led away in handcuffs, she saw me standing there, coordinating with the authorities. Her look of disbelief turned to pure hatred. She screamed curses at me, but it was too late. The case caused a massive public scandal, even bigger than Hugo's viral video. The media dubbed the organization the Baby Love Ring. The trial was public. I and the other women sat in the front row. Seeing Clara and her accomplices in prison uniforms, I felt not triumph, but a profound sense of relief. Justice was finally served. Clara received a long prison sentence for organizing prostitution, fraud, and other charges. The rest of the network also received fitting punishments. On the day of the verdict, I cried tears of release. The darkest chapter of my life was finally closed. I thought with Clara and her cronies behind bars it was all over. But an organization that large had roots that ran deep. There were still masterminds at large, powerful people who had lost a lucrative enterprise. And in their eyes, the one who started it all was Hugo. Hugo was living in the darkest days of his life. Fired, disowned by his family, he lived in a cheap, squalid room in a poor neighborhood. Physically maimed and stripped of his dignity, he drowned his sorrows in alcohol. I learned this from an old acquaintance and felt nothing. It was the price he had to pay. But the underworld doesn't forget its debts. The people behind Clara tracked Hugo down. They saw him as the source of their misfortune. His humiliating video had triggered the collapse of their empire. They needed a scapegoat and a warning to others. One rainy night, as a drunken Hugo staggered home, 3 large, menacing men were waiting for him in a dark alley. They didn't kill him. They beat him brutally, methodically breaking his arms and legs, slashing his face with a knife, destroying what was left of his once handsome features. When they were done, they left him for dead in a pool of blood and rainwater. He was found the next morning and taken to the hospital in critical condition. The police called to inform me, as the divorce wasn't yet legally finalized. I sat in silence for a long time. There was no joy, no pity, just a hollow emptiness. The cycle of hatred had spun out of control. After much hesitation, I decided to go to the hospital. Not for him, but for myself. I needed to put a real end to the past. The sight in the hospital room was grim. Hugo was wrapped in bandages, his face swollen and deformed, hooked up to a ventilator. He was utterly alone. I sat beside him in silence. This broken man had once been my world. Sensing my presence, he slowly opened his dull, lifeless eyes. His dry lips moved. I leaned in close and heard his final, whispered words, "I'm sorry." And then his eyes closed. A flat line appeared on the heart monitor, accompanied by a long, cold beep. He was gone. Tears streamed down my face. I wasn't crying for him. I was crying for our dead love, for the happy days that would never return. I was crying for myself, for all the pain and loss I had endured. I stood up, wiped my tears, and walked out of that room. A great weight had been lifted from my shoulders. All the hatred, all the pain, seemed to vanish with his death. The past was truly over. 1 year later, I walked through a park full of golden autumn leaves, holding Leo's hand. He was almost 2 now, toddling around, babbling mama. Seeing his innocent smile, my heart filled with a warm peace. After Hugo's death, I sold the old house and its painful memories. My son and I moved to a quiet apartment, starting a completely new life. The media storm passed. Life returned to normal. Time, and my love for my son, healed my wounds. The scars remained, a reminder of what I had survived and the strength that helped me stand up again. I opened a small bakery downstairs. The work was pleasant, providing enough for us and giving me time for Leo. The smell of fresh bread, the smiles of customers, playing with my son, this was my happiness. The Wives Society, as we called ourselves, remained close friends. Laura won back custody of her son. The others found their balance. We supported each other, building new futures from the rubble of our pasts. "Mama, swing." Leo's voice pulled me from my thoughts. I smiled and lifted him onto the swing. As I pushed him, his delighted laughter filled the air like wind chimes, chasing away the last shadows of the past. Watching him fly high, I knew I had made the right choice. I had fought, not to destroy others, but to protect this precious life, to win a peaceful future for my son. The storm had passed. After the rain, the sun shines again. And before me now was a clear blue sky, a wide-open future filled with nothing but love and the happy laughter of my son. Peace had finally returned.